B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comments. It's Tuesday, February 14th, 2017. It's Valentine's Day. And for you, it's either an irritating Hallmark holiday that requires you to go through a ritual, or it's a wonderful expression of the romance and love you feel for fellow human beings. You choose. We have a Valentine greeting from somebody named Chelsea that we'll share with you later in today's podcast. And someone has done it. As soon as Trump took office, I started speculating on who would be first to jump ship. And I had an idea about trying to find a partner to set up a website where people could enter their wager or their guess. Maybe even a way to make a little money. But I didn't act on it in time, and now the first former Trump administration official is official. His name is Mike Flynn, the former general who was the head of the National Security Council for 24 days. And on Facebook today, on a page of Gustavo Alcantar, is a bingo card. And on the top of the card it says, "Next to go." And down the middle row is Spicer, Purdue, the free space in the middle, and then the space is covered over that used to say Flynn. And all the other top appointees are listed here: Gorsuch for the Supreme Court, Carson over at Housing and Urban Development, and even Melania gets her own square. So I give credit to whoever created this. I don't know where it came from. It says Gustavo Alcantar's photos. So Gustavo, you're a clever person, and you did a great job of bringing this idea into fruition. So yes, Michael Flynn, after we were told by Kellyanne Conway midday yesterday that he enjoyed the full confidence of the president, well, in the evening, he submitted his resignation, and Trump accepted it. We're told the reason was that he wasn't honest. He misled Vice President Trump. He lied about his phone conversations with the Russian ambassador. But lying is a central requirement of surviving in the Trump administration. After all, how do you keep up with Trump himself, with the Donald? And it was just on Friday when Trump was asked on Air Force One as he was heading to Florida if he knew about the Mike Flynn lied and that there's a transcript of the intercepted phone call that proves this. And Trump said, well, gosh, I'm going to have to look into that. And he flatly lied. We now have confirmation that he was informed weeks ago that his national security advisor hadn't told the truth about his interactions with Russia's ambassador. So we have layers of lies. And the biggest bullshitter has just fired the guy who got caught in a lie. And this is so richly ironic. Mike Flynn is one of the people who is fully briefed in the intelligence community. He ran the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency. He knows whose phones are monitored. And so when he called the Russian ambassador, how fucking stupid do you have to be to know that your call is likely to be monitored, and even though you use wiggle words and, make suggestions without being too explicit, we're told that a fair reading of the transcript, which of course is still secret, he's been fired based on a transcript that nobody has publicly seen, just the latest victim of high-level official leaks, anonymous leaks in Washington. And so this is so rich in irony. It's more than the daily adult minimum requirement of irony. That a spook gets tripped up in the surveillance state, and then he lies about it despite knowing that there's probably a transcript of that phone call out there, General Flynn. And this reminds us of David Petraeus, who was running the CIA. And who leaked on him? Exposing that he had shared documents that were top secret with his lover and biographer, Paula Broadwell. And so the Petraeus example is fresh enough that somebody like Mike Flynn had to know about this. And did he figure, with Trump coming into office, he was just bulletproof? Trump lies, I can lie, and we'll all get away with it? It is really stunning. So his letter of resignation said, unfortunately, because of the fast pace of events, I inadvertently briefed the vice president-elect and others with incomplete information regarding my phone calls with the Russian ambassador. What bullshit. Everybody knows this is bullshit. So we're going to have an interim national security advisor, another military guy, Lieutenant General Joseph Kellogg, who had been recruited by Mike Flynn. And Pence says that he got pretty steamed because he was lied to. Now, he is the vice president in an administration based on lies. And while he has yet to be caught in, a direct lie, he routinely defends the lies of Donald Trump. And so this kind of dissembling, separation from the truth, is a hallmark of this administration, and that makes it even crazier making that the reason given for Flynn's exit is because he lied. So there are investigations into other issues. Flynn went on a trip to Moscow in 2015. It was paid for by Russia Today, the television network that operates in the United States. He sat at the table right next to Vlad Putin, and he got paid for it, and apparently he failed to file reports on that as required by law for a former general. And this has got the Democrats all worked up again. They're asking, what did the president know? When did he know it? They want to try to link this to the to the unproven claims that Russia hacked into the DNC, hacked into John Podesta's email, and gave that stuff to WikiLeaks. That seems like such ancient history now. But the Democrats hope to, roll all this up into one big ball and then bowl the Trump team over with it. But they don't have the leverage in the Congress, and they're demanding a 9/11 style commission to investigate this. That will make sure we never see the truth, and whatever comes out of it will be delayed by 18 months to 2 years. And likewise, we can't rely on congressional committees to investigate this stuff honestly. And so we're going to live in this soup of disinformation, leaked information that can't be verified. And I don't see an end to this in sight. Now, we're trying to track down exactly the sequence of events here, because it was released or was revealed on Monday night by the Washington Post that Sally Yates, who was the acting attorney general after the Obama administration had left office and before Jeff Sessions had been confirmed, well, Sally Yates, apparently about a week ago, with the support of FBI Director James Comey, who had resisted the idea at first, they went and talked to the White House counsel. And they shared with the counsel, whose name is Donald McGahn, their concerns that Mike Flynn might be subject to blackmail, because they had the transcript of the intercepted phone call, and they could prove, or they knew, that Flynn has lied publicly, gotten the vice president and others to lie for him. And so we're told that they did a deeper search. And this was also triggered by the lack of neener response from Moscow to the sanctions announced on December 30th. The White House reportedly was shocked that Russia decided to take the high road and not respond or retaliate to the U.S. sanctions. And so that caused people at the FBI to say, what's going on here? This is what we're told by the Washington Post. The search turned up the Ambassador Kislyak's communications, which the FBI routinely monitors, says the Post. And the phone call in question with Flynn And from that call and subsequent intercepts, FBI agents wrote a secret report summarizing Flynn's discussions with the ambassador. And then Yates decided that she thought the call was highly significant and potentially illegal. And so she huddled with other people like John Brennan and the former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper. They were all reportedly alarmed by this, and yet they didn't do anything until Yates apparently went to McGahn in early February. Now, some people look back at one of Trump's tweets there on December 30th when Russia surprised Washington by not retaliating, and he tweeted, "Great move on delay by V. Putin. I always knew he was very smart." Now, this suggests, when we ask the question, what did the president know, when did he know it, that's an old Watergate saw, that the president knew and maybe even got a report from Mike Flynn on that phone call. Or that he is, using coded language or intermediaries, put Flynn up to it. And so Flynn's a good soldier. Trump seems to think he can rely on him to take the fall and not to flap his lips. But as I mentioned, Trump himself is such a constant liar. Here's the quote from Friday on Air Force One. When asked about Flynn's communication with the Russians, Trump told reporters he had to look into it. "I don't know about that," he lied. And the fuller quote is, he was asked specifically if he's aware of the Washington Post story, that's David Ignatius, based on intelligence leaks. And when asked about that, he said he hadn't seen that at the time. Of course he was involved. And this is a quote from Sean Spicer. "I said he was aware of the situation right after the White House counsel informed him back in January." Well, January when? Like January 1st or at the end of January? So this is the fodder that will be chewed upon by partisans, and the Democrats smell blood in the water. They're going to go for it. But I don't think they're going to get very far. And Trump has this ability to just create new and bigger distractions no matter what happens. And it's Tuesday, and we haven't seen the new executive order on travel bans and Muslim bans and immigration issues yet. That's something else that will be sprung probably in the next few days to try to divert our attention again. Now, over at The Guardian, Spencer Ackerman has some theories about the struggle between Trump Co. and the deep state. And he writes that there are two camps. One within the intelligence agencies is inclined to view Flynn's exodus as a peace offering from Trump. Trump served up the scalp. Mike Flynn was clearly at odds with many in the intelligence community. It led to his firing back in 2014 from the DIA. But Ackerman suggests the other faction, which is particularly evident among intelligence analysts, considers Flynn merely a reflection of Trump. And some in this camp consider Russian interference in the election to be the central fact of the Trump presidency. And I'll reiterate something that I've said repeatedly here. If the Democrats believe so strongly that Russia manipulated our elections, why did they stand by so passively and allow Trump to take office without a fight, without airing all this out? And that's why I remain skeptical about so much of the central thrust of the Democratic leaders' focus on these issues. And I support the notions advanced by Dan Wright at Shadowproof. The headline reads, "Deep State Leak Campaign Brings Down National Security Advisor Flynn." And in the payoff paragraph here, he says, while there's no doubt Flynn's troubled relationship with Pence was a factor, it's downright irresponsible not to note that Flynn had many enemies within the deep state, including those in a position to leak information to the press to take him down. That the Russian phone call is not a coincidence. Former intelligence officers like John Schindler have claimed without evidence that Flynn is a Kremlin agent. The New York Times reported there was an investigation into Flynn's trip in 2015 by the Department of Defense. Some of the leaks almost certainly came from CIA, which has a long-running feud with Flynn going back to the Obama administration. Flynn was ultimately fired by Obama, but not before the DIA created a now notorious 2012 memo that blamed the CIA for the rise of ISIS. So these grudges go back a ways. And now, testing this administration that's in chaos and turmoil, Russia, we have learned, has secretly deployed a new cruise missile system despite complaints from American officials that it violates the Arms Control Treaty from 1987. Now, Trump, in his phone call with Putin, a week or two ago, you hear about this? He put the call on hold to ask his aides, what about this treaty that now that we're not talking about the same treaty, so I want to be clear. But Trump got 3 or 4 lines about what the treaty was that Putin wanted to extend until 2021, and then Trump trashed it and said, no, that was a bad deal. And maybe he feels the 87 test ban treaty was a bad deal. One aspect of it banned American and Russian intermediate-range missiles based on land. And this new system attracted criticism from the Obama administration. They tried to persuade Russians to change the system while it was still in its test phase to take it out of violation. And instead, the Russians have moved ahead, deploying a fully operational unit. We'll see just how serious that is, but these are the kinds of things that can occur when Trump is distracted and putting out fires there in the Oval Office. So, as I mentioned, the Democrats are calling for an investigation. Most Republicans are keeping pretty quiet, except for John McCain and a local comment in St. Louis by Senator Roy Blunt, who sits on the Intelligence Committee. McCain is pretty blunt. He said, Flynn's resignation raises further questions about the Trump administration's intentions toward Vladimir Putin's Russia, including statements by the president suggesting moral equivalence between the U.S. and Russia, despite its invasion of Ukraine, annexation of Crimea, threats to our NATO allies, and attempted interference in American elections. That's quite a laundry list there. And again, all of this appears to be part of a deep state and establishment effort to keep Trump from warming relations with Russia. And as you know, I think that the Russophobia is hysterical, it's over the top, and it's being used for domestic political advancement, like the way the Democrats want to blame all this stuff on the Russians. And I hope I'm clear enough that I don't believe the Russians are our friends or that we should just sit back and go la-di-da. But there is some middle ground there, and I'm not sure we will find it. Glenn Greenwald over at The Intercept has some strong views on this, and I partially agree with him. He points out that these official leaks are criminal acts, serious criminal acts. And he cites the U.S. Code 18798, whoever knowingly and willfully communicates or otherwise makes available to an unauthorized person any classified information obtained by the processes of communication intelligence from the communications of any foreign government shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. So it is a serious violation, and I continually call out these official leaks. They remain anonymous. No evidence is provided. The media treats it all as fact. Nobody is challenging or even skeptical about whether the transcripts actually say what they say and contradict Mike Flynn's public statements. We all just have to take that on faith. So Greenwald writes that all of these officials committed serious felonies can hardly be dismissed. But, he said, the officials leaking this information acted justifiably, despite the fact that they violated the law. That's because the leaks revealed that a high government official blatantly lied to the public about a material matter. Now, I understand the logic that Greenwald is advancing here, and as it applies to the principled whistleblowers who've leaked information, whether it's Chelsea Manning or Ed Snowden, I agree. Where I disagree with Greenwald is this statement. He said the episode with Flynn underscores another critical point. The motives of leakers are irrelevant. It's possible, indeed likely, that these leakers were not acting with benevolent motives. He goes on to say it's likely that the motive here was vindictive rather than noble. And here he wants to say that, nevertheless, the motive doesn't matter. And this is crucial to the defense of somebody like Ed Snowden or somebody who leaks after him. And that is that Snowden did not try to share information with another country in an act of treason. He tried to alert the American people to a clear and present danger and violation of our rights. It is a justifiable act on the part of Snowden. I don't agree that it's justifiable by these highly placed and well-protected official leakers. And if we keep operating this way, we're going to have a government in shambles. There's no question about it. In Europe, allies are concerned by the erratic approach of the Trump administration, and one, of course, anonymous intelligence official from the European Union said to a reporter, "I was hoping you could tell me what the fuck is going on over there." I can share their pain. 2 Democratic senators on the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee are demanding information about Donald Trump's smartphone. They're concerned that the Galaxy, whatever Samsung version he uses, it's an S3 that's about 5 years old, is highly hackable. And yet he insists on continuing to use it. I don't know about that, but it's worth telling you about. Also, I've been saving this for a few days, and let me confess that the amount of news coming out these days is dizzying, and I acknowledge that I don't have time to cover the recent human rights reports from Syria and questions about their validity. There are many other issues that I don't have room for currently in the podcast, and I wish I could, compress the time or do something to fit more in. But this story surfaced last week, and it's important about all the whistleblowers that we're discussing today. Tom Drake is somebody I deeply admire. He blew the whistle at the NSA over the competitive programs Thin Thread and Trailblazer. And we've aired this out at length. If you want to search at peterbcollins.com, just put Drake in the search window, and you'll find several of the conversations I've had with this man. And he's highly principled and deeply committed to our Constitution and not to a wayward mission at his old shop at the NSA. So I'm linking to this article from Jenna McLaughlin at The Intercept last week, and I hope you'll check it out because a guy named Pat Eddington, a former CIA officer, is pressing hard for the release of the Inspector General's report that he has read and says would vindicate Tom Drake, Bill Binney, Kirk Wiebe, and the others who tried to draw attention to the contractor fraud and the other problems inside the NSA. They weren't trying to spill any classified information. They were trying to protect the taxpayers and our constitutional rights. And it's important to me that ultimately we see the truth about Thin Thread, which was this homegrown system that only cost a few $1 million and critically protected the constitutional rights of people who were surveilled. But Trailblazer, which was a boondoggle that never worked, they spent billions on it, as high as $6 billion is the figure I've heard. And it intentionally did not protect Americans from unlawful, unconstitutional surveillance. So I hope we will see that report. And speaking of whistleblowers, I also picked up a story last week on Facebook from John Kiriakou, the CIA whistleblower who went to prison because he admitted we tortured people. And he draws attention to an article in FedScoop, I've linked to it in the show file for this podcast, that the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency has built a suite of software to monitor the email and other communications of its employees. And it analyzes them looking for emotion, looking for feelings. And it interprets certain feelings as threats to U.S. national security and reports them as potential insider threats. The application is called Scout. It uses advanced psycholinguistics and proprietary algorithms protected by 10 U.S. patents to identify troubling content in emails, texts, and other communications sent through your networks. That's where the spies spy on the spies. I mentioned it's Valentine's Day, and I want to give a shout-out to my sweetheart, Kathy. And I also want to give a special greeting on Valentine's Day to two lovebird friends of ours, Ben and Eliza. They met at our house about 3 years ago, and they got married in January in Maui. And they sent a picture of the ceremony near Hana, and then they came home. And they have been sick for over 4 weeks, and they have a rare condition called rat lung meningitis. And I don't want to alarm anybody because it's not highly contagious, and the number of cases that I've been able to identify is not huge. But in Maui, there are these rats that carry a parasite, and somehow that is transmitted to slugs. And the slugs, which can crawl over food or fruit products or other things, apparently are the channel that transmits to humans. And both Ben and Eliza are very ill. They've both been in the hospital the last couple of days with this rare form of meningitis. And it resists treatment, basically has to run its course, and it's devastating to them. So I just want to give a special greeting today to Ben and Eliza, and I hope for a quick recovery from them, for them, and I just want them to know they're in my thoughts every day. And I'm going to pass on my plug that I usually do about subscriptions today. You've heard that spiel, and you know what to do if you're so motivated. But I do want to share a Valentine message from Chelsea E. Manning, and she wrote from Leavenworth, Kansas, to honor the people in prison and outside who have supported her. She wrote, "Minutes after President Obama announced the commutation of my sentence, the prison quickly moved me out of general population and into the restricting housing unit where I'm now held. I know that we're now physically separated, but we'll never be apart, and we are not alone. Recently, one of you, a fellow prisoner, asked me, 'Will you remember me?' And Chelsea writes, 'I will remember you. When I was afraid, you taught me how to keep going. When I was lost, you showed me the way. When I was numb, you taught me how to feel. When I was angry, you taught me how to chill out. When I was hateful, you taught me how to be compassionate. When I was distant, you taught me how to be close. When I was selfish, you taught me how to share. Those outside of prison may not believe that we act like human beings under these conditions, but of course we do. And we build our own networks of survival.' It's a beautiful statement. I've linked to it. And if you're so inclined, I hope you'll read the entire piece from Chelsea Manning. Veterans heading to Standing Rock to try to support the water protectors have been intercepted by law enforcement, and 2 of them were jailed. They found a little weed and some hash oil that these veterans, former soldiers, used to treat their PTSD. And they are really, making an aggressive effort to monitor and arrest people. They stopped a car because it had plates from Michigan. This is in the Dakotas, North Dakota in this case. And so it's very clear that with the help of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, the crackdown is underway at Standing Rock. And we're going to have to come up with other approaches. This is distressing. According to The Intercept, leading civil rights groups who have been bankrolled by the telecom industry are now using deceptive tactics to scuttle net neutrality. Over at the Federal Communications Commission, the new Republican chairman, Ajit Pai, who's a former attorney for Verizon, is pushing to repeal the net neutrality reform that was put in on an administrative basis by the previous administration. Tom Wheeler was the previous FCC chairman. But the arguments raised by these community groups like the Urban League and who else here? The NAACP, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, the Organization for Chinese Americans. Well, they're writing letters saying, no, we shouldn't have the FCC do this. It should be done by statute. Now, I actually agree with that if we didn't have a Republican-controlled Congress. But there is no way that a net neutrality law is going to get through this Congress that would have any of the features that we would consider to be essential for net neutrality. And here are the numbers. We have huge amounts of funding flowing to these groups. The Urban League alone got $1.2 million in a single year from Verizon. And the others were also part of a feeding frenzy after the Comcast merger with NBC. And there was over a $1.8 billion in funds that Comcast doled out to various community groups. So they're calling in those chits, and you and I will pay the price as net neutrality will become a part of history. Stephen Mnuchin was confirmed yesterday, the foreclosure king, as our next Secretary of the Treasury. The vote again on party lines, 53-47, and it shows that Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, should just give it up. Why pretend to be a Democrat, Joe? Just join the Republicans and be honest about it, will you? And finally today, a murky story from Kuala Lumpur. At the airport yesterday, 2 women ran up to the half-brother of North Korea's strongman Kim Jong-un, and they stabbed him with poison needles. And he died shortly thereafter. The half-brother is named Kim Jong-nam, and he is the son of a different mother, fathered by Kim Jong-il, and he was passed over by Daddy in favor of the youngest baby-faced fat boy, Kim Jong-un. And he apparently accepted his father's decision, but was living outside of North Korea. He was on his way to Macau when the 2 women poisoned him to death. Thanks for joining me for my News and Comment podcast today. You're free to share this far and wide. It's available on YouTube, if that's a place you like to find it. I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.